Have you ever opened Salesforce, looked at the screen, and just paused for a second longer than you expected? Not because it's broken and not because it's slow, but because something just feels rather heavy. A lot of fields, a lot of sections, too many buttons, too many decisions to make. And here's the interesting part. This usually happens in systems that were built with the best intentions. Systems that were designed to be tailored, flexible, comprehensive, perfect for the business. And yet they feel a lot harder to use. And so today I want to talk about something that almost no one talks about, the silent cost of over-customization. Not a technical debt, not performance issues, but something far more dangerous and challenging, cognitive debt. The hidden mental load your system is placing on every single user every single day. And more importantly, what that means for training, what that means for adoption, and why no amount of configuration can fix a problem that lives in the user's mind. Let's be honest. Most Salesforce orgs don't really start that complex. They grow in complexity over time. One request at a time. Can we add this field? Can we track this? Can we automate this? Can we customize this space for our team? And each request in isolation makes perfect sense. But over time, you don't end up with a tailored experience anymore. You end up with a layered experience. And layers create weight. And here's what it looks like from a user perspective. They open a record and see 50 plus fields, multiple sections, conditional logic they don't really understand, buttons they have no clue what to use them for, information they are thinking like, what do I do with this? And now before they even do their job, they have to think, where do I start? What matters here? Is there anything I can ignore? What happens if I get this wrong? That moment of hesitation, that is cognitive debt. And it compounds every click, every record, every day. Let's break this down. Cognitive debt is the mental effort required to use a system that feels harder than it should. And it's not about intelligence or capability. It's about load. Humans have limited mental bandwidth. And when a system demands too much of it, decision makers slow down. Error increases. Confidence drops. Avoidance starts creeping in. And this is where it even gets interesting. Because from a leadership perspective, well, the system is fine. Reports are running, data is being entered, processes exist. But underneath that, the users are guessing. They're skipping steps, creating workarounds, or disengaging entirely. And that's where it becomes dangerous. Cognitive debt doesn't show up in dashboard, but it does show up in low adoption, poor data quality, frustrated teams like Salesforce feels like a chore conversations. Over-customization increases volume. You have more fields, more options, decreases variation, and it increases uncertainty. And when you combine these three, you don't get flexibility, you get friction. Because users now have to interpret the system. They have to understand context, make micro decisions constantly. And here's the key point I want to do really take you in. Every additional field is a question. Every variation is a decision. Every automation is something to understand or trust. So when we say we tailored Salesforce to the business, what we often mean is we've increased the thinking required to use it. Now let's bring this back to training, because this is where most organizations get it completely wrong. When faced with a complex system, the normal instinct is we need more training. So what do? More sessions, more documentation, more walkthroughs, more explanations. But the problem is you cannot train your way out of cognitive overload. If a system requires too much thinking, training becomes overwhelming. It becomes forgettable, difficult to apply, and users might understand it in the moment, but they won't retain it. Because the system itself isn't intuitive anymore. And that's when you start hearing things like, we had training, but people still aren't using it properly. Yeah, we explained it, but didn't stick. Users keep asking us the same questions. All of that is not training failure. That is cognitive design failure. Because training does have a role here to help sort this. A very powerful one, but not in the way most people think. Great training just doesn't explain the system. It filters the system. It helps you to understand what matters, what doesn't, what should they focus on, what can they ignore, how can we reduce noise. Instead, create clarity, build confidence. So instead of saying, here's everything Salesforce can do, a great trainer says, here's what you need to do in your role, in your day-to-day. That's why role-based scenario-driven training is so critical, because it removes irrelevant information, it anchors learning in real tasks, and reduces decision-making. But even then, training on its own is not going to be enough. If you want to reduce cognitive debt, you have to combine the system design with enablement. And here's what it looks like in practice. You start by simplifying before you train. Don't train complexity, challenge it. Do we need all these fields? Do all users need to see everything? Can we reduce variation? Second, train for confidence, not coverage. Stop trying to explain everything. Start focusing on core workflows, key actions, decision clarity. And then use training as a diagnostic tool. Your training session will tell you everything. Watch for hesitation, confusing, repeated questions, because those are not users' issues. They are design signals. And reinforce through enablement, not one-off training. Cognitive load doesn't appear after one session. It needs reinforcement, practice, real-world application. And so let's come back to the question that I started with. Have you ever opened Salesforce and just paused? That pause isn't random, and it's not user resistance, it's not lack of capability, it's cognitive debt. And in many cases, it's been designed into the system, not intentionally, but gradually, layer by layer, decision by decision. So the next time you hear we tailored Salesforce perfectly for the business, start asking a different question. At what cost to the user? Because the real goal isn't a system that can do everything. It's a system that people can use confidently, consistently, and without hesitation. And that's where training done properly doesn't just support the system. It reshapes how people experience it. If this resonates with you, take a look at your own system this week. Not from a feature perspective, but from a user perspective. Or ask them, where are they pausing? Where are they hesitating? Where are they thinking too much? Because that is where your next improvement should be. Not in adding more, but in making it easier for your users to use what's already there.